My brother's voice cut through the ballroom like a knife through cheap butter. This is my stinky sister. No real job, no future, just a manual laborer. 200 people in designer suits turned to look at me. Champagne flutes paused mid-air. Someone actually gasped. And there I stood, in my nicest jeans and the silk blouse I'd bought specifically for this occasion, feeling the heat rise to my cheeks as scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. Gregory raised his glass with a smirk. My own brother, at his merger celebration, in front of everyone who mattered to him. And the worst part, my mother smiled. Not a big smile, just that tight little expression she always wore when Gregory put me in my place. Like she agreed, but was too polite to say it herself. Let me back up. My name is Susie Fowl. I'm 34 years old. And according to my family, I'm the failure who digs ditches for a living. Here's the thing they don't know. I own Fowl and Company Landscape Architecture. 47 employees across 3 states. Last year, we cleared $11 million in revenue. This year, we just landed a $4.2 million contract with the city for the downtown riverfront restoration project. My company has been featured in Architectural Digest twice. We won a National Design Award for the Morrison Park restoration. But sure, I'm just the stinky sister who plays in dirt. I never told my family about any of this. Not the money, not the awards, not the fact that my weekly payroll is $47,000. I guess I had this naive idea that they would eventually see me for who I am without a price tag attached. That maybe, just maybe, they would love their daughter and sister without needing to know my net worth first. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Gregory is 38, 4 years older than me and 400 years more arrogant. He works in finance, which in our family basically means he walks on water. Mom has been calling him her little success story since he got his first internship at 22. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every random Tuesday phone call somehow circles back to Gregory's latest promotion, Gregory's new car, Gregory's important clients. And me? Oh, Susie's still doing her little gardening thing. It's not gardening, Mom. I've told her that approximately 7,000 times. I'm a licensed landscape architect. I design outdoor spaces, manage construction projects, and run a company with a fleet of equipment worth more than Gregory's house. That's nice, honey. But when are you going to get a real job? You know, something inside, where you don't get all dirty. I stopped trying to explain years ago. Some battles aren't worth fighting, or so I thought. Gregory called me 3 weeks before his big merger party. He said he wanted me there, which should have been my first red flag. Gregory never wants me anywhere. I'm the embarrassing relative he pretends doesn't exist at his fancy networking events. His exact words were memorable. Listen, Susie, this is a really important night for me. There will be serious people there. So maybe don't talk too much about your ditch digging business, okay? I don't need you embarrassing me. I should have said no. I should have told him exactly where he could put his invitation. But here's my fatal flaw. I actually love my brother. Somewhere underneath all his arrogance is the kid I used to build blanket forts with, the teenager who taught me to drive, the person I thought would always have my back. So I said yes, because I'm apparently a glutton for punishment. I spent 3 days finding the right outfit. Not too fancy, because Gregory would mock me for trying too hard. Not too casual, because then I'd be the slob who couldn't dress properly. I settled on dark jeans, a cream silk blouse, and the one pair of heels I own that don't make me want to cry after 20 minutes. When I walked into that ballroom, I actually felt hopeful. Maybe this would be different. Maybe Gregory would introduce me properly, and I could have a normal conversation with normal people who didn't already assume I was worthless. Then I saw the venue and I almost laughed out loud. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel. Specifically, the newly renovated Grand Metropolitan Hotel with its award-winning outdoor terrace, sustainable garden features, and custom water installation. I should know. My company designed and built all of it. We finished the project 14 months ago. There's a bronze plaque by the fountain with our company name on it, Fowl and Company, right there in the lobby. My brother had walked past it without a second glance. I grabbed a glass of champagne and tried to find a quiet corner. That's when I spotted my mother making her grand entrance, heading straight for Gregory like a moth to a flame. She hugged him for a solid 30 seconds. When she finally noticed me, I got a brief wave and a look that said, "Don't cause problems tonight." "Hi, Mom, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. My business is thriving. I just hired 3 new project managers. But yes, let's definitely talk more about Gregory's suit." I was mentally composing my escape plan when I felt a tap on my shoulder, and there stood Todd Brennan, my ex-boyfriend, the man who dumped me 8 years ago because I was, quote, "going nowhere with that lawn mowing thing of yours," unquote. The man who told me I had no ambition and would never amount to anything. He'd gotten a hair transplant since I last saw him. It looked like someone had glued a small, frightened animal to his forehead. But sure, I was the one who'd let myself go. "Susie," he said, acting like we were old friends instead of exes who hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. "Wow, you look the same." "Thank you, Todd. You look different, very different, like a completely different hairline." He didn't catch the sarcasm. He never did. Turns out Todd was Gregory's potential investor. Of course he was, because this night wasn't already a disaster waiting to happen. Before I could excuse myself to go literally anywhere else, Gregory clinked his glass and called everyone's attention. He pulled me toward him with one arm, that big fake smile plastered across his face, and then he said it. "Everyone, I want you to meet my family. This is my beautiful wife, Vanessa, my wonderful mother, Diane, and this is my stinky sister. No real job, no future, just a manual laborer." The room erupted in laughter. My mother smiled. Todd snorted champagne through his nose, which was the only satisfying moment of the entire evening. And I stood there, frozen, wondering how I'd spent 34 years loving people who couldn't even pretend to respect me. But here's the thing about being underestimated your whole life. You learn to watch, you learn to wait, and you notice things that other people miss. Like the way Gregory kept checking his phone with barely concealed panic, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, the way he drank 3 glasses of champagne in 20 minutes. Something was wrong, and one older gentleman in the corner noticed it too. He wasn't laughing at Gregory's joke. He was watching my brother with the focused attention of a hawk spotting prey. Our eyes met across the room. He raised his glass to me, just slightly. I had no idea who he was, but I was about to find out. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time is it there. I see everything. Thank you so much for your support. Now, where was I? Oh yes, standing in the middle of my personal nightmare while 200 strangers laughed at me. The party continued around me like nothing had happened, because to them, nothing had. Gregory's little joke was already forgotten, just another moment of networking entertainment. But I could still feel the echo of it in my chest, that familiar weight of being the family disappointment. Vanessa materialized beside me like a designer-dressed vampire, sensing wounded prey. My sister-in-law had perfected the art of the compliment that was actually an insult. "Oh, Susie," she cooed, looking me up and down. "Couldn't find anything nicer to wear. I mean, it's fine for you. Very practical." Vanessa was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first truck. Her blonde hair was styled in that complicated updo that requires 3 hours in a professional. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine if that magazine was called Women Who Married for Money Monthly. "Thanks, Vanessa. I love your dress. Very tight." She couldn't tell if I was being nice or not. Vanessa never could figure me out, which I considered one of my greatest accomplishments. The next hour was a masterclass in social torture. Todd kept popping up wherever I went, making condescending comments about how I should really consider a career change before it was too late. My mother cornered me twice to remind me that Gregory was nervous, and I should be supportive instead of sulking in corners. And Gregory himself paraded around the room like a peacock who discovered the secret to eternal smug. But I kept watching, and I kept noticing things. Gregory's investor presentation was flashy but vague. Lots of promises about growth and opportunities, very few actual numbers. The executives from the company he was merging into looked polished and confident, but they also kept exchanging glances whenever Gregory spoke. The kind of glances that said, "Are you hearing this too?" I know about business. You don't build a $12 million company without learning how to read a room, and this room was reading Gregory as someone who was selling harder than he should need to. That's when I spotted them. My father was sitting in a chair near the window, looking smaller than I remembered. When did Dad get so thin? He was 72, but had always seemed strong, capable, eternal in that way fathers are supposed to be. Now he looked tired, confused. His suit hung on him like it belonged to someone else. Mom was standing over him, talking in that sharp whisper she uses when she's annoyed. Dad just nodded along, not really engaging. I started walking toward them when Gregory intercepted me. "Hey, not now," he hissed. "Dad's fine, don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I want to say hi to our father. Later. I need you to mingle. Todd thinks you might be a good contact for some of his lower-tier clients. Small landscaping jobs, that sort of thing. It would be good for you to have something on your resume." "I literally own a company, Gregory. I have a resume. It has things on it." He waved his hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. Real experience. Come on, don't be difficult." I let him lead me away because I was too stunned to argue. Small landscaping jobs, lower-tier clients. My company had just finished a project for the governor's mansion, but sure, let's start small. Todd was waiting with that hair transplant smile. He launched into a monologue about his investment philosophy while I mentally calculated how many of his portfolios I could buy outright. The answer was most of them. "You know, Susie," he said, leaning in like he was sharing a secret, "I always knew you had potential. You just needed direction. If you'd stayed with me, I could have helped you become something." "I became something without you, Todd. That's kind of the point." He laughed like I'd told a joke. "That was always your problem. No sense of what you could achieve with the right guidance." I was about to tell him exactly where he could put his guidance when I heard Vanessa's voice rise above the crowd. She was talking to a group of women near the bar, and she wasn't being quiet about it. "Oh, Susie. She's sweet, really. A bit simple. She digs holes for a living. I keep telling Gregory he should help her find a real career. But you know how family is. You can't choose them." The women laughed. Polite, social laughter. The kind that agrees without committing. My mother was in that group. She didn't laugh, but she didn't defend me either. She just sipped her wine and studied the ceiling like it was the most fascinating architecture she'd ever seen. Something inside me cracked. Not broke. I've had too much practice for that. But cracked. Like ice before it gives way. I needed air. I slipped out to the terrace. My terrace. The one my company had designed. The evening air was cool, and I could smell the jasmine we'd planted in the raised beds. Everything out here was my work, my vision, my success, and nobody inside had any idea. That's when the older gentleman from earlier stepped through the doors. He was tall, maybe late 60s, with silver hair and the kind of expensive casual that says, "I don't need to try anymore." His watch probably cost more than my first 3 years of business earnings combined. "Beautiful work out here," he said, nodding at the garden beds. "The water feature especially. Very sophisticated design. Thank you." He smiled. "You did it, didn't you? This terrace. I recognized the style from Morrison Park." I blinked at him. "How do you know about Morrison Park?" "Because I read, and because your project won a National Design Award last year. There was a very nice article in Architectural Digest. Susie Fowl, founder of Fowl and Company." He extended his hand. "Warren Beckford." I shook it, still confused. "Should I know you?" "Probably not. I'm retired now. Spent 40 years in investment banking. I know your brother's type." He chuckled. "I also know his company." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Warren looked back through the glass doors to where Gregory was working the room, that too bright smile firmly in place. "Your brother is in trouble," Warren said quietly. "His company is under federal investigation. Securities fraud. The merger he's celebrating tonight isn't a promotion. It's an escape hatch. He's trying to jump ship before the whole thing goes public." I felt the ground shift beneath me. That's not possible. Gregory is the golden child, the success story. Warren's expression was kind but serious. "The investigation has been ongoing for 8 months. I still have friends in the industry. The firm he's joining is essentially buying his silence. But they don't know what I know." He paused. "And I'm guessing they don't know what you know either." "What I know?" Warren nodded toward my father, still sitting alone by the window. "Your father looks worried, confused. Has Gregory been helping him with his finances?" The crack inside me widened. "How did you know that?" "I didn't, but I've seen this pattern before. When people get desperate, they take from the people who trust them most." I stared at my father through the glass. Dad had mentioned money being tight lately. I'd assumed it was just the economy, maybe some bad investments. But what if it was worse? Warren handed me his card. I think you should look into this, quietly. And if you find what I suspect you'll find, you should know that your brother's house of cards is about to collapse. The only question is who gets buried underneath. He left me standing on my own terrace, surrounded by my own work, with the sudden, terrible certainty that everything I thought I knew about my family was wrong. Gregory wasn't the success story. He was the con man, and Dad might be his victim. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Warren Beckford's business card on my nightstand like a ticking bomb. Federal investigation, securities fraud. The words kept rolling through my mind like thunder in the distance. Part of me wanted to believe it wasn't true. Gregory was arrogant, sure. Dismissive, absolutely. A world-class jerk who'd humiliated me in front of 200 people, definitely. But a criminal? That seemed like a stretch, even for him. Then I remembered Dad's face at the party, the confusion, the way his suit hung too loose, the way Mom kept snapping at him like he was a child who couldn't be trusted to behave. I've always had good instincts. You don't survive in construction without learning to trust your gut. When a contractor is lying about materials, you feel it. When a client is hiding budget problems, you sense it. When something is wrong, your body knows before your brain catches up. My body was screaming that something was very, very wrong. At 6 a.m, I gave up on sleep and did what I always do when I need to think. I drove to a job site. We were in the middle of installing a Japanese garden for a tech executive in the suburbs, and watching the crew work always calms me down. I sat in my truck, a 10-year-old Chevy Silverado with 200,000 miles and a dent in the tailgate from the time my foreman accidentally backed into a boulder. I love that truck. It's paid for. It runs perfectly, and it doesn't care how much money I make. Unlike certain family members I could mention, the morning sun came up over the construction site, and I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth. First, I called Warren Beckford. He answered on the second ring, which told me he'd been expecting my call. I asked him to tell me everything he knew about the investigation into Gregory's company. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. Warren was careful to only share what was technically public information or common knowledge in financial circles. But it was enough. Gregory's firm had been cooking the books for years, inflating returns, hiding losses, moving money around to cover gaps. The SEC had been building a case for nearly a year. Gregory wasn't just going to lose his job. He was potentially facing criminal charges. But Warren also admitted he didn't know everything. The family stuff, the personal finances, that's beyond my scope. But I know the pattern, Susie. When these guys start to feel the pressure, they look for lifeboats. And usually those lifeboats belong to people who trust them. People like our father. I thanked Warren and hung up. Then I sat in my truck for another 20 minutes, watching my crew move boulders into position, thinking about my next move. Here's something about me that my family never understood. I didn't build a $12 million company by accident. I built it by being methodical, patient, and very, very thorough. When I take on a project, I plan every detail. When I face a problem, I gather information before I act. When I make a decision, I make sure I have the evidence to back it up. Gregory had spent his whole life underestimating me. He thought I was the dumb sister who got lucky with a small business. He had no idea what was coming. Step 1 was reconnaissance. I called my dad that afternoon, keeping my voice casual. "Hey, Dad, just checking in. How are things?" The conversation started normal enough. He talked about his garden. Dad had always loved puttering around in the yard, probably where I got my own love of growing things. But when I asked about his trip to the financial advisor last month, his voice changed. Oh, that. Gregory's handling all that now. He said it would be easier if he managed everything together. Something about better returns. I kept my tone light despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. That's nice of him. "So Gregory has access to your accounts?" "He has power of attorney," Dad said. Like it was the most normal thing in the world. Your mother insisted. She said I was getting too old to handle the complicated stuff. Power of attorney. My 38-year-old brother had power of attorney over our 72-year-old father's finances, and nobody had bothered to tell me. I ended the call with a cheerful goodbye and immediately called my attorney. Rachel Park has been my business lawyer for 8 years. She's handled everything from contract disputes to employee issues, and she's the smartest person I know when it comes to protecting assets. I told her what I suspected, and she went quiet for a long moment. Susie, if what you're telling me is true, this could be elder financial abuse. That's a serious crime. I know. You need to be careful here. If you're wrong, you could damage your family relationships permanently. If you're right, she paused. If you're right, your brother could go to prison. I know that too. Rachel recommended a private investigator she'd worked with before, a guy named Frank Moretti who specialized in financial fraud. I called him within the hour. Frank was gruff, direct, and completely unimpressed by family drama. "Just tell me what you need and I'll find it," he said. "Save the soap opera for the holidays." "I think my brother has been stealing from my father. I need proof." Frank said he'd have preliminary information within 2 weeks. He warned me that I might not like what he found. "I'm prepared for that," I told him, but I wasn't. Not really. While Frank dug into the financial records, I did my own research. I called the city assessor's office and found out that there was a new lien on my father's house, a lien that had been filed 6 months ago. Dad had lived in that house for 35 years, owned it free and clear since I was in high school. Now suddenly there was a $200,000 debt attached to it. My hands were shaking when I hung up the phone. I also discovered something interesting about the firm Gregory was supposedly merging into. They were legitimate, successful, well-respected, but they had a reputation for being extremely cautious about partnerships. They did extensive due diligence, background checks, financial audits, the works, which meant either they hadn't finished their research on Gregory yet, or someone had given them incomplete information. Warren had mentioned he still had contacts in the industry. I wondered just how much influence a retired investment banker might still have. 3 days after the party, I drove to visit my parents, not to confront anyone. I needed more evidence for that. I just needed to see my father, to assess the situation with my own eyes. What I found made my blood run cold. Dad was worse than he'd looked at the party. He seemed confused about basic things, what day it was, whether he'd eaten lunch. Mom kept answering questions for him, talking over him like he wasn't there. I managed to get Dad alone for a few minutes while Mom was in the kitchen. I asked him directly about his finances. His eyes got cloudy. "I don't know, honey. Gregory says everything's fine. He's taking care of it." "Do you know how much money is in your retirement account, Dad?" He couldn't answer. He didn't know. He didn't even know which bank his accounts were in anymore. "Gregory takes care of everything," he repeated, like a mantra. "Gregory knows what he's doing." I left my parents' house that day with tears in my eyes and fury in my heart. My brother had taken advantage of our father's trust, his aging mind, his belief that family would never hurt him. Gregory had built his career on looking smart while other people did the real work. Now he was building his escape fund on our father's life savings. 2 weeks later, Frank Moretti called with his report. The damage was worse than I'd imagined. Over the past 2 years, Gregory had transferred $340,000 from Dad's accounts into his own. He'd taken out the loan against the house without Dad fully understanding what he was signing. He'd even cashed in a life insurance policy that was supposed to go to Mom if anything happened to Dad. Total theft. Over $500,000. My father had worked 40 years as an electrician. He'd saved carefully, lived modestly, built a nest egg meant to carry him and Mom through their final years. And Gregory had stolen nearly all of it. I sat in my office with Frank's report in my hands, looking out at the company I'd built from nothing. 47 employees depended on me, millions in contracts, a reputation I'd earned through sweat and determination, and thousands of hours of hard work. Gregory had never worked a day like that in his life. He'd just taken and taken and taken, but his taking was about to stop. I called Rachel. Then I called Warren. Then I called a contact I'd made 3 years ago when my company did the landscaping for the federal building downtown, a guy named Jerome Williams who worked in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Gregory thought he was the smart one in our family. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next 3 weeks were the most focused of my life, and considering I once managed 17 construction projects simultaneously during a supply chain crisis, that's saying something. I set up what I called my war room in my home office, Frank Moretti's financial report. bank statements, property records, a timeline of every suspicious transaction Gregory had made. I covered an entire wall with documents and sticky notes, like some kind of revenge-themed Pinterest board. My cat, Biscuit, was very concerned about my mental state. She kept sitting on the most important documents and meowing at me like she was trying to stage an intervention. But Biscuit doesn't understand complex financial fraud, so I ignored her professional opinion. Jerome Williams at the FBI was more helpful than my cat, though slightly less cuddly. When I called him with what I'd found, there was a long pause on the line. "Miss Fowl," he finally said, "you understand that what you're describing is a separate crime from what we're already investigating?" I know. Securities fraud is one thing, but stealing from a 72-year-old man with declining cognitive function? That's elder financial abuse. Jerome asked me to send everything I had. Frank's report, the bank records, the property liens, all of it. He promised to review it personally and get back to me within a week. True to his word, he called 6 days later. "We're very interested in pursuing this," he said. The elder abuse charges would be state level, but given the overlap with our federal investigation, we can coordinate. However, we need to do this carefully. Your brother is already a person of interest in our case. If he gets spooked and runs, we lose everything. What do you need from me? Jerome explained that the FBI had been building their case against Gregory's company for months. They had evidence of securities fraud, falsified reports, and misappropriated client funds. Gregory wasn't the mastermind. That honor went to his boss, but he was complicit enough to face serious charges. The problem was timing. They wanted to arrest the key players simultaneously to prevent anyone from destroying evidence or fleeing. My evidence about the theft from Dad added another dimension, but it also complicated things. "We need a controlled environment," Jerome said. "Somewhere we know he'll be. Somewhere we can coordinate with local authorities." That's when I remembered Gregory's announcement at the party. He was planning a family dinner at an upscale restaurant next month, a celebration of his merger, with his new business partners in attendance. "What if I told you exactly where he'll be," I said, "on a specific night surrounded by all the people he's trying to impress?" Jerome was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me more." Over the next 2 weeks, I became the world's most supportive sister. I called Gregory to congratulate him on the merger. I sent Vanessa flowers with a note saying I was so happy for them. I even called my mother and suggested we all get together to celebrate Gregory's success properly. Mom was suspicious at first. "Since when do you care about Gregory's career?" "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, nearly choking on my own words, about being more supportive, about appreciating what Gregory has accomplished. "I want to try harder." Mom practically melted through the phone. "Oh, Susie, that's so mature of you. Gregory will be so pleased." Gregory was indeed pleased. So pleased that he called me himself, which hadn't happened in approximately 3 years. "Susie, this is great," he said. "Really great. I'm glad you're finally coming around. This dinner is going to be important. My new partners will be there. I need the family to make a good impression. I'll be on my best behavior, I promised." What I didn't mention was that Warren Beckford would also be attending. I'd called him the day after Jerome and I made our plan. Warren had been delighted to help. "I've been waiting 40 years to watch someone like your brother get what's coming to him," Warren said. "Consider me your +1. Warren also made a few strategic phone calls to his contacts at the firm Gregory was joining. He didn't tell them everything, just enough to make them nervous, just enough to make them ask questions, just enough to ensure that when the truth came out, they'd be ready to run for the exits. The restaurant Gregory chose was called Carmichael's. White tablecloths, overpriced steaks, the kind of place where they judge you for ordering the chicken. I'd actually done some landscaping consultation for them 2 years ago. They have a beautiful patio garden that I designed pro bono in exchange for a lifetime discount on their wine list. Life is about making strategic investments. I coordinated with Jerome on the timing. The FBI would have agents in plain clothes positioned in the restaurant. They wouldn't make a scene. This wasn't a movie. They'd wait for my signal, then approach Gregory quietly and ask him to step outside. Professional, controlled, devastating. But first, I had one more piece of preparation. I spent an entire weekend with my accountant going over my finances. My company was worth $12 million. My personal savings, investments, and property, totaled another $3 million. I was, by any reasonable measure, wealthy. I'd never felt wealthy. I still drove my old truck, still wore work boots most days, still got dirt under my fingernails on a regular basis. Money had never been the point for me. Building something was the point. Creating something beautiful out of raw materials and hard work. That was what mattered. But money was about to matter very much, because I was going to use mine to fix what Gregory had broken. I set up a trust fund for my father's care. I arranged to pay off the fraudulent lien on his house. I contacted an elder law attorney about establishing proper guardianship to prevent anyone from exploiting him again. When this was over, Dad would be protected. Mom would be taken care of, and Gregory would face the consequences of his choices. The night before the dinner, my phone rang. It was Gregory. His voice was different, strained, almost desperate. "Susie, I need to ask you something. And I need you to not ask questions." "What is it?" "I need to borrow some money. Just $50,000. I'll pay you back within a month, I swear." I kept my voice neutral despite my racing heart. $50,000? "Gregory, that's a lot of money. I know, but I'm in a tight spot. Some investments didn't pan out the way I expected. It's temporary. The merger is going to solve everything. I just need to get through the next few weeks." He was scared. I could hear it in his voice. The golden child was finally realizing that his house of cards was swaying in the wind. I pretended to consider it. "That's really a lot, Gregory. I'm not sure I have that kind of cash just lying around." "Come on, Susie. I know you've done okay with your little business. You must have something saved up." Your little business. Even now, even when he was begging me for money, he couldn't help being condescending. "Let me think about it," I said. "We can talk more at dinner tomorrow." He thanked me profusely, which was a first. Gregory had never thanked me for anything in his life. I hung up the phone and sat in the darkness of my living room, Biscuit purring on my lap. Tomorrow, everything would change. Gregory thought he was getting a supportive family dinner and a $50,000 loan from his stinky sister. What he was getting was the end of everything he'd built on lies. I scratched Biscuit behind her ears. "You know what, Kat? Revenge really is a dish best served at a restaurant with a lifetime wine discount." Biscuit didn't respond. She's more of a listener than a conversationalist. Carmichael's was beautiful that evening. Soft lighting, fresh flowers on every table, the gentle hum of expensive conversation filling the air. I'd put on my best dress, a simple navy blue number that I'd bought for an industry awards ceremony 2 years ago. Heels that didn't make me want to cry, actual jewelry. Gregory didn't even notice. "Susie, there you are," he said when I walked in, already scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. "You look fine. Listen, have you thought about what we discussed?" "We can talk later," I said. "After dinner. Let's not make this about money." He practically vibrated with frustration but forced a smile. Right, family first." The private dining room was already filling up. Gregory's new partners from the merger firm, 2 polished executives named Richard and Sandra, who looked like they'd been manufactured in a laboratory for maximum corporate blandness. Vanessa, glittering in a dress that probably cost more than my first year of business revenue. Mom, regal in her disapproval. Dad, looking confused but happy to be included. And Todd, because of course Todd was there, still chasing Gregory's coattails, still sporting that unfortunate hair transplant, still convinced he was the smartest person in any room. He made a beeline for me immediately. "Susie, wow, you clean up nice. I almost didn't recognize you without the dirt." "Thanks, Todd. I almost didn't recognize you with the hair." He touched his head self-consciously. "It's a new treatment, very cutting edge." "It's certainly something," I agreed. If you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means everything to me, and it helps more people find these stories. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart. Now, back to the moment I'd been waiting for. Warren Beckford arrived precisely on time, looking distinguished in a charcoal suit. He shook hands with Richard and Sandra, who clearly recognized his name and reputation. Their eyes went wide. "Warren Beckford?" Richard said. "I didn't realize you'd be here." Warren smiled pleasantly. "I'm an old friend of the Fowl family. Susie invited me." Gregory's face went through several colors in rapid succession. He hadn't known I knew Warren. He certainly hadn't expected me to invite industry royalty to his dinner. "That's great," Gregory managed. The more the merrier. We took our seats, the wine was poured, the appetizers arrived. Gregory stood to make his toast. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, that familiar smug smile firmly in place. "This merger represents everything I've worked for. A new chapter. A chance to prove that hard work and smart decisions always pay off." He gestured around the table. "I'm surrounded by the people who matter most. My beautiful wife, my wonderful mother, my new partners who I know will lead us to incredible success." He paused, looking at me. "And even my sister, who's finally learning to appreciate what real success looks like. Some of us work with our hands. Some of us work with our minds. I've always believed that the mind is the more valuable tool." Polite laughter around the table. Mom beamed. Dad looked confused. Vanessa smirked. And Todd actually winked at me like we were sharing a joke at my expense. I smiled serenely and sipped my wine. Gregory continued his self-congratulatory speech for another 5 minutes. His voice was confident, but I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. The merger partners kept exchanging glances. Warren was watching everything with the patient attention of a man who'd seen this show before. Finally, Gregory raised his glass. "To the future. To the future," everyone echoed. That's when Warren cleared his throat. "Before we drink to that," he said, standing slowly, "I think there's something your new partners should see." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table to Richard and Sandra. Gregory went pale. "What is this? What are you doing?" Warren's voice was calm, almost gentle. "It's the results of a preliminary audit. Something your new partners requested quietly last week after I suggested they might want to look more closely at the books." Richard opened the folder. His expression went from curious to horrified in about 3 seconds. "Gregory," he said slowly, "what is this? These numbers don't match what you showed us. These irregularities, that's a mistake," Gregory said, his voice rising. "Those are old figures. The current situation is completely different." Sandra was reading over Richard's shoulder. "This shows systematic falsification going back 3 years. There are SEC violations all over this." The room went silent. Every eye was on Gregory. And then his phone rang. He grabbed it like a drowning man reaching for a life preserver. "Hello?" His face went white. "What do you mean they're at my house? What warrant?" He looked up, wild-eyed, and that's when he noticed the 2 people who had quietly entered the dining room. A man and a woman, professional, calm, dressed in suits that screamed federal government. "Gregory Fowl," the man said, "I'm Agent Williams with the FBI. We have some questions for you regarding financial fraud and the misappropriation of funds. We'd like you to come with us." Gregory's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "This is insane. I haven't done anything wrong." The female agent produced a document. "We also have a warrant related to elder financial abuse, specifically the unauthorized transfer of funds from the accounts of Harold Fowl, your father." Dad looked up at the sound of his name. "What? What's happening?" Mom's face was frozen. Vanessa had gone completely silent, her champagne glass suspended halfway to her lips. Gregory turned to me, his eyes blazing. You did this." I stood up slowly, smoothing my dress. "No, Gregory, you did this. I just made sure everyone found out." I addressed the table, keeping my voice steady. "My brother has stolen over $340,000 from our father over the past 2 years. He took out loans against Dad's house without his informed consent. He exploited our father's trust and declining health to fund his lifestyle while his company collapsed around him." I looked at Richard and Sandra. "Your merger would have made you accessories to his fraud. Warren did you a favor." I looked at Mom. "You put him in charge of Dad's finances because you thought he was the successful one. You thought I was just the stinky sister with no real job." And finally, I looked at Gregory. "I own a company worth $12 million. I have 47 employees. I just signed a contract with the city worth $4.2 million. I've been featured in Architectural Digest. I won a National Design Award. And I never told you because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I'm worth." The room was absolutely silent. "But you didn't," I continued. "You humiliated me. You dismissed me. And worst of all, you stole from the man who spent 40 years working to give us a good life." Gregory's face crumpled. "Susie, please. You have to help me. You have to tell them this is a misunderstanding." Agent Williams stepped forward. "Sir, We need you to come with us now." As they led Gregory out of the dining room, he looked back at me one final time. His golden child mask was completely gone. He just looked small, scared, pathetic. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a deep, weary sadness. But I also felt something else, relief, because finally, after 34 years, the truth was out. Vanessa stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. "I need a lawyer," she was saying as she fled the room, "and a divorce attorney." Todd sat frozen, his mouth hanging open. He'd almost invested his money with Gregory. He'd almost tied himself to a federal criminal. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You really own a $12 million company?" "Goodbye, Todd." I walked over to my father and took his hand. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Susie," he whispered, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I trusted him." "I know, Dad. It's not your fault. I'm going to take care of everything now." He squeezed my hand. "You were always the good one. I should have seen it." We sat there together while the chaos swirled around us. Mom was crying. Richard and Sandra were making hurried phone calls. Warren was quietly finishing his wine with the air of a man who'd seen many empires fall. Outside, Gregory was being helped into an unmarked car. No handcuffs, not yet. But his career, his reputation, his marriage, his freedom, all of it was over. The stinky sister had won. 1 month later, I stood on a construction site in the early morning light, watching my crew install the final water feature for the downtown riverfront project. The air smelled like fresh earth and possibility. My boots were muddy, my hands were dirty, and I had never felt more like myself. Gregory's arrest had made the local news, though I'd refused all interview requests. The federal charges for securities fraud were proceeding alongside the state charges for elder financial abuse. His assets were frozen. His former company had collapsed entirely. The merger obviously was dead. Vanessa filed for divorce 48 hours after the dinner. I heard she was already dating one of her divorce attorneys. Some people really do land on their feet. Todd had called me twice, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails about how he'd always believed in me and maybe we could get coffee sometime. I deleted both messages without responding. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. They're worth watching. Burn from a safe distance with a nice glass of wine. The money Gregory stole from Dad was being recovered through the legal process, but I didn't wait for that. I paid off the fraudulent lien on my parents' house immediately. I set up a trust for Dad's care with my own funds. I hired a part-time caregiver to help Mom manage his needs. Dad's cognitive decline was real, but he was doing better now that the stress of his financial confusion was gone. He spent most days in his garden, puttering around with his tomato plants, occasionally calling me to chat about nothing in particular. Those calls were the best part of my week. Mom and I had a complicated conversation a few days after the dinner. She didn't apologize. That's not really her style. But she did say something that surprised me. "I never understood what you did," she admitted. "It seemed like you were just playing in the dirt." Gregory explained things in ways I could understand. Numbers, titles, things that sounded impressive. She paused. "I should have asked you more questions." It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was a start. Warren Beckford and I had lunch once a week now. He'd become something like a mentor, offering business advice and introducing me to contacts who could help Fowl and Company grow even further. He said watching Gregory's downfall was the most entertainment he'd had since retirement. The man has a dark sense of humor. I appreciate that. My phone buzzed. A text from my foreman. The water feature was ready for its final test. I walked over to the control panel and flipped the switch. Water shot up in perfect arcs, catching the morning sunlight, creating tiny rainbows in the mist. The crew cheered. A few of them clapped me on the back. This was what I'd built. Not just fountains and gardens, but a company full of people who trusted me. Projects that would last for decades. Beauty created from raw materials and hard work and stubborn determination. Gregory had spent his career shuffling money around spreadsheets, creating nothing, building nothing, helping no one. And in the end, he'd lost everything. I'd spent my career getting dirt under my fingernails, creating spaces that brought people joy, building something real. And in the end, I had everything that mattered. My phone rang. A new client wanting to discuss a $3 million commercial project. I looked down at my muddy boots, my calloused hands, my crew celebrating another successful installation. Some people spend so much time looking down on others, they never notice they're standing on quicksand. I answered the phone with a smile. This is Susie Fowl. How can I help you? Thank you so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now and don't miss the best part. You will love it. See you in the next story.